Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and really unpack the ideas that shake things up in a field. Today, we are definitely strapping in for a stompbox revolution. We're focusing not just on the legendary sounds from one company, but really how that company fundamentally dictated the shape, the format, the whole practical reality of electric guitar gear for, the next 50 years.
It's absolutely right. Yeah, we're diving deep into MXR, a company often listed as, I think, the ninth major player in that sort of first wave of commercial pedals back in the early 70s. And when you look at the gear back then, I mean, a lot of it was big, kind of fragile, often really cumbersome, almost like a repurposed lab gear sometimes. But MXR, they showed up with a completely different idea about industrial design.
Right. So our mission today is to get under the hood of that shift. How did this small operation, just two engineers up in New York, how did they manage to standardize an entire global industry footprint? That's huge. We're going to unpack the specific design choices, those iconic sounds distortion, plus Synphase 90, the ones and the players who made them famous, and also track the, frankly, surprising resilience of the brand. I mean, they went bankrupt, but came back stronger than ever.
It's a really fascinating story, and it's a great case study in just how critical industrial design is, even in a creative field like music, because you had companies like Electro-Harmonix, Vox, making fantastic effects, no doubt. But often they were in these big, awkward boxes. MXR kind of walked in and just dictated the format. They were the ones who basically said, okay, this is how big a pedal should be, this is how it should look, and here's how tough it needs to be to survive life on the road. They really defined the container itself and that standard. It's still with us today.
Okay, let's dig into that blueprint. Where did this whole standardization thing really begin? It starts, like you said, in Rochester, New York, 1972, founded by Terry Sherwood and Keith Barr. And these weren't just, musicians tinkering in a garage. This sounds like it was an engineering venture from day one.
Oh, absolutely. And the location, Rochester, that tells you something too. Back then, Rochester was a major hub for optics, high-tech stuff, advanced electronics manufacturing. Think Kodak, think Xerox. Sherwood and Barr came out of that environment. So they weren't just good with the soldering iron. These were engineers who understood mass production, reliability, efficient design.
Right, that technical background. Mm-hmm. And Keith Barr's involvement, especially. That gives us a real clue about MXR's impact, doesn't it? Because he didn't just stop there.
Exactly. That's a key insight nugget right there. If you want proof of Barr's design vision, just look where he went after MXR. Keith Barr co-founded Alesis in the 80s. And Alesis, they were huge in making pro-level digital studio gear synths, drum machines, effects processors affordable for the home studio broom. It was the same philosophy, really. Take complex, expensive tech and package it smart. Make it compact, reliable, and price it so regular musicians could actually buy it. That whole approach, that powered MXR's early focus on ruggedness and standardization.
So the goal wasn't just making cool sounds. It was solving a real practical problem for working musicians. Let's zone in on that core MXR philosophy. What were they aiming for that others maybe weren't prioritizing?
Well, their philosophy seems built on three pillars, really aimed squarely at the touring musician: ruggedness, compactness, and affordability. These things were designed specifically engineered to be road warriors. They had to survive getting tossed in gig bags, dropped, beer spilled on them, and maybe most importantly, getting stomped on night after night on a dark stage. They had to be tough.
That sounds like a direct answer to what was out there at the time. Could you paint a picture of what the competition's gear actually looked like? We hear bulky, but what did that mean for a guitarist trying to actually use this stuff live?
Oh, it meant headaches, basically. Yeah, you had contemporaries like Electro-Harmonix, EHX, or Musitronics, and they made some incredible sounding effects, really groundbreaking stuff. Think of the big muff fuzz, often in a big sort of clunky metal box, or the Mutron filters. Those things were massive, often needed their own special power supply. They were just bulky, took up tons of space on stage, sometimes felt more like studio gear, not really optimized for getting kicked around. MXR saw that and decided to shrink everything down.
That's the key difference, isn't it? They saw a problem with the physical form, not just the circuit inside. They realized maybe the biggest issue wasn't just the sound, but being able to reliably use that sound night after night.
Exactly right. And that's where they moved beyond just being another effects company and really started setting the standard. The moment they introduced that distinctive small rectangular box, usually made from tough die-cast aluminum, and crucially, designed so you could line them up neatly, they weren't just selling a product, they were setting the industrial standards.
So let's get specific on that design innovation. What were the actual dimensions we were talking about? That little rectangle became the benchmark.
Yeah, the classic MXR box was famously compact, something like 4.4 inches long by 2.4 inches wide, roughly. Now, that might just sound like numbers, but the genius was It optimized two things: minimal pedal board space and just enough room inside for a 9-volt battery, which was huge back then. Prioritizing that small footprint, usually just one or two big, sturdy knobs, tough foot switches, it was pure efficiency. And that minimalist design, focused on durability and space, that became the de facto standard for guitar pedals, full stop.
Wow. So this is really the moment MXR standardized the whole industry's footprint. So when you look at almost any pedal board today, doesn't matter if it's cheap stuff or fancy boutique pedals, the physical size, the way they line up, that rectangular shape, it all traces back to that 72 Rochester design. It's like a design language focused purely on the essentials. And it worked because it solved a massive practical problem for musicians on the road.
Yeah.
You could suddenly carry, 3 or 4 effects in the space 1 or 2 used to take up?
Right, so they perfected the container. Now let's talk about what they put inside it. MXR very quickly cemented its reputation, defining the sound of 70s rock. This section's all about those core releases, the Phase 90 and the Distortion Plus Metal Way. These were the absolute pillars of early MXR. They established that whole reputation, simple design, built like a tank, and crucially, great tone that was instantly usable. No manual needed, really.
Let's start with the one everyone pictures first, the Phase 90, that bright orange box. MXR's debut pedal, 1974, right? And just a masterpiece of simplicity.
It really is. Technically, the Phase 90 is a 4-stage phaser. Now, for anyone listening who's not sure what phasing is, think of it as that dynamic, sweeping, whooshing sound. It splits your signal, shifts the phase of one part, mixes it back, creates these sort of peaks and valleys moving through the sound. 4 stages was kind of the sweet spot, warm, noticeable movement, but not too overpowering.
But the real genius, connecting back to that MXR philosophy, was the interface, or lack thereof.
Exactly. It just had one knob. Speed. That's it. You plug in, turn the knob, and you get that sound, that swooshing, shimmering thing. Think about other modulation effects back then, like the Univibe, multiple controls, big treadle pedal. The Phase 90 packed all that sophisticated phasing circuitry into this simple orange box.
And the cultural impact, it's hard to overstate it. When you think of iconic rock guitar tones, the Phase 90 sound is right up there.
Oh, absolutely. You just cannot talk about the Phase 90 without mentioning Eddie Van Halen. It's all over Eruption, right? And his early records, he often ran it right into a cranked Marshall amp. It gave his clean tones that liquid shimmer, and his distorted tones got that unique, throaty kind of growl and swirl. It wasn't just an effect for him, it was part of his core sound.
I think that simplicity, just having one knob, is maybe underappreciated today when pedals have 10 controls and dip switches.
That simplicity was the feature, like you said. By limiting it to one control, they basically guaranteed that wherever you set that knob, the sound was musical, it was consistent, it was recognizably that Phase 90 sound. It gave musicians one clear parameter for expression instead of getting lost tweaking. Very performance-focused.
Okay, so that's motion. Let's switch gears to their other huge early release, the Distortion Plus S, which actually came out a year earlier, 1973.
That's right, the Distortion Plus S. This gave them a foothold in the gain world, but with a different flavor. It wasn't like the typical fuzzes of the day, think fuzz face or big muff, which were often thick and woolly sounding. The Distortion Plus was different. It's based on op-amp clipping.
Okay, hang on. Op-amp clipping. Let's break that down simply. What is that, and why does it sound different?
Good question. It's key. Op-amp just means operational amplifier. It's a tiny integrated circuit, basically designed to boost a signal. In the Distortion Plus DOT, the circuit is designed to push that op-amp really hard, to intentionally overdrive it, clip the signal waveform aggressively, often using diodes. And the sound of op-amp clipping, it's generally more compressed, more focused, maybe a bit more articulate than, say, the smooth saturation you get from fuzz pedals using transistors.
So it delivers a specific kind of grit. Sharper, more focused, less smooth maybe, more aggressive.
Precisely. If the Phase 90 was about movement, the Distortion Plus was about sharp, almost surgical grit. It became a favorite of guys like Randy Rhoads, for his tight, palm-muted middle tones with Ozzy. Super focused sound. It was also huge with early punk and new wave players who wanted that raw, biting edge without the sort of blurry sound of some older fuzzes.
It's really impressive how quickly they built out a whole lineup in the mid-70s. They didn't just sit on those 2 hits. They expanded fast like they were trying to fill every essential slot on the board.
Yeah, they were smart. They immediately leveraged the Phase 90's success with Spin-Off, created a kind of tiered modulation line. You had the Phase 45, that was a subtler 2-stage version, probably for players who wanted just a hint of movement, maybe cleaner stuff. Then they went the other way with the Phase 100. That was more complex, 6 stages, I think, with extra controls. for much deeper, swirly, more experimental sounds. Same core idea, just scaled up and down.
And then comes another absolute giant, arguably as important in its category as the Distortion Plus was for gain, the Dynacomp, 1976.
Oh, the Dynacomp. Yeah. Huge piece of gear history. Still everywhere today. It was one of the first really widely available compression pedals specifically for guitarists, and it's famous for that specific squishy sound, that really noticeable snap at the start of the note, the sort of pump, and then massive sustain. Makes notes just jump out and ring forever.
Can we unpack that squishy sound a bit more? Compression can be confusing. Why is the Dynacomp's particular compression so famous?
That's a great point. See, a lot of high-end studio compressors, they aim for transparency. They use fancy circuits, VCAs, to control dynamics without really changing the tone much. The Dynacomp, though, uses a specific type of circuit based on FETs, an early kind of compression tech, and it's anything but transparent. It grabs the start of the note really hard, clamps down the volume, and then boosts the heck out of the tail end as the note fades. That really audible signal manipulation, that hard pop, and the long sustain, that's the squish or pump people talk about.
So that aggressive character became a feature, not a bug. It actually defined some genres.
Absolutely. It immediately became a staple in country music. You need that consistent, clean volume and that sharp, snappy sustain for chicken picking, right? Dynacomp delivered that. And funk music, too, for those clean, rhythmic parts where every note needs equal punch. It's still kind of the benchmark for that specific, very audible compression sound.
We should also mention the weirder side of MXR, though. They weren't just about utility. They offered some truly out-there sounds, but still in that reliable box, like the Blue Box from '74.
The Blue Box, yeah. Perfect example of their wild side. It's fuzz mixed with this weird 2-octave down effect, and it's famously chaotic, tracks notes kind of badly, spits, sputters. It often sounds less like a guitar and more like a synth bass that's about to explode. People say you have to kind of fight it to get something usable.
But when you do tame it, the results are iconic.
No doubt. The classic example is Jimmy Page. He used the Blue Box on Fool in the Rain. That thick, kind of syrupy subterranean sound on the main riff, that's pure Blue Box. It proved MXR wasn't just making meat and potatoes effects. They were willing to get experimental and push boundaries, too.
That leads nicely into utility and innovation. This is where MXR started building the idea of the modern pedal chain, not just individual effects, things that weren't really effects, but signal tools.
That's a really key distinction. Take the microamp. Super simple, one knob, clean boost pedal. Its influence is just massive because it really helped establish the idea of the always-on pedal. Before, pedals were mostly for solos or specific parts. The microamp wasn't about adding a crazy sound. It was about adding subtle, always-on volume, or maybe pushing an amp harder, or making up for signal loss in a chain. Just a brilliant piece of utility.
And beyond simple boosts, they tackled really complex studio effects, shrinking them down using new tech to fit that standard box.
This might be their biggest technical achievement in the 70s, honestly. MXR pioneered compact versions of the flanger, and crucially, analog delay. Before MXR, analog delay usually meant big, fragile tape echo machines, like an Echoplex or huge, expensive rack units. MXR basically democratized analog delay for the masses.
How'd they do that? How did they shrink something that complex into, an orange box?
They used what was then brand new tech. Bucket brigade chips, or BBDs. Okay, simple analogy time for listeners. Imagine a line of tiny buckets. They're actually capacitors. The guitar signal comes in, each bucket holds a little piece of the electrical charge and then passes it down the line to the next bucket, one after another, in time. That process takes time, right? That delay in passing the signal is the echo.
Okay, that's a great way to picture it.
And the crucial part is every time the signal gets passed from one bucket to the next, it loses a tiny bit of high-frequency detail. It degrades slightly. That intentional characteristic decay is what gives analog delay its signature sound, warm, dark repeats that kind of melt away, unlike the perfect copies you get from digital delay. Using BBDs, MXR brought these complex modulation sounds and true analog delay into a small, affordable stomp box. It totally changed what was possible live.
And while they were building this arsenal of sounds and tools, they were also nailing the branding with that color coding. Ties right back to that performance-first idea.
Oh yeah, classic practical design becoming brilliant branding. MXR used bold, solid colors for instant recognition. Think about it. You're on a dark stage, maybe some smoke, lights flashing. You need to know instantly which pedal you're stomping on. You don't have time to read labels. It's visual shorthand. Orange is Phase 90, yellow is Distortion plus Denier, red is Dynacomp, blue is Blue Box. Simple, effective.
They weren't just selling circuits. They were selling instantly identifiable tools. That color coding really cemented their look, made them recognizable on any stage, anywhere, even from the back of the room.
So by the mid to late 70s, MXR wasn't just innovative, they were dominant. Culturally, market-wise, their pedals basically became the default US stomp boxes for that whole era. Really, a global standard.
It seems like they hit that sweet spot, adopted across all kinds of genres. We've mentioned some names, but the sheer breadth of players using them is pretty staggering.
It really covers the map. You've got sonic architects like David Gilmour using their phasers and delays for those huge Pink Floyd soundscapes. Then hard rock guys like Van Halen, obviously. Jam band heroes like Jerry Garcia, who apparently loved the Dynacomp and Microamp for their clean utility and signal management. Even huge mainstream acts like Tom Petty relied on them. It just shows that core philosophy, small, tough, simple, was exactly what touring pros and studio guys needed. Reliable, good-sounding tools.
And the competition noticed. They started copying that format, right?
Absolutely. That widespread use just confirmed how right they got the industrial design. That physical footprint was so practical, so successful that future giants basically copied it. When Boss, Roland, enters the market big time in the late 70s and really takes over in the 80s, their compact pedal chassis, it's clearly modeled on the MXR standard, just with their own tweaks. MXR really laid down the template for the modern pedal.
But, as history often shows, even dominant players can stumble. Despite all that success, MXR hit a major wall in the 1980s. What happened? What was the turning point that led to their decline and eventually bankruptcy?
Yeah, the decline. It's kind of a classic story of a pioneer getting overtaken by competitors who innovated on, convenience features, really. As Boss ramped up their global production, they introduced some key technical upgrades that MXR's simple, almost Spartan design philosophy lacked. MXR had prioritized simplicity, maybe sonic purity above all else. But the market, especially as pedal boards got bigger, started demanding more convenience and better signal chain reliability.
Okay, so it became a technical gap. What specifically did Boss bring to the table that MXR was missing that kind of forced players to look elsewhere?
Two main things, really, and one seems incredibly basic now. Buffered bypass and status LEDs. MXR traditionally used what's called true bypass, which means when the pedal's off, the signal goes straight through, completely bypassing the circuit. Guitar purists often love that. Theoretically preserves tone. Boss, however, introduced buffered bypass.
Let's define that simply. Buffered bypass. Why was this such a big deal as pedal boards started growing in the 80s?
Okay, so think about the signal coming out of your guitar. It's actually pretty weak, technically high impedance. Every foot of cable, every connection, it degrades that signal a tiny bit, especially the high frequencies. People call it tone suck. Now, in the 70s, with maybe 2 or 3 pedals, not a huge deal. But in the 80s, guys started having 8, 10, even more pedals. That signal loss became a major problem. A buffered bypass pedal, even when it's off, has a tiny built-in preamp, the buffer, that constantly strengthens and conditions the signal. It acts like a signal booster along the chain, ensuring a strong, clear signal reaches the amp, no matter how many pedals or how much cable you have.
Oh, okay. So MXR was sticking with the pure true bypass idea, but Boss offered the practical fix for these increasingly complex rigs.
Exactly. For the average player dealing with long cables and lots of pedals, the tiny theoretical benefit of true bypass just wasn't worth the signal getting weak and muddy. Buffered bypass solved a very real problem.
And then the second missing feature, the LED. Seems so obvious now.
Right. It almost sounds funny today, but it was critical. Those classic 70s MXR pedals. No light to tell you if they were on or off, seriously. You were relying totally on your ears. And on a loud, dark, chaotic stage, that just wasn't reliable enough. Did you accidentally kick the Dynacomp off? You wouldn't know until your clean tone suddenly disappeared mid-song.
Wow, I'm picturing Van Halen on some huge stage, smoke machines going, how did they even manage without knowing if a pedal is on?
Intense focus, I guess. And probably marking settings with tape, relying on muscle memory. But the LED, which Boss and others introduced, that was a game-changing quality of life upgrade, instant visual confirmation. MXR started losing ground fast because they didn't adopt these modern conveniences. They had pioneered the format, but they kind of stalled on improving the interface. And yeah, they struggled financially and went bankrupt by the mid-80s.
That's a really powerful lesson, isn't it? Sometimes those small practical things, a light, a buffer, matter more to the mass market than the core sound itself.
Yeah.
But bankruptcy wasn't the end of the story for MXR. The core circuits were just too good to disappear.
Exactly. And that brings us to the revival under Jim Dunlop. Dunlop, already famous for picks, capos, the crybaby wah, they acquired the MXR name in 1987. And this was a brilliant move. Dunlop saw that even though the company had failed, the actual pedal designs, the circuits, the brand identity, those colored boxes were pure gold.
So what was Dunlop's strategy? How did they bring the brand back without losing that vintage magic?
Their first move was smart. Commit to authenticity. They reissued the big three classics, Phase 90, Distortion plus Dynacomp, brought those original sounds back to the market, tapping into all that nostalgia and timeless tone. But crucially, they did add the modern features everyone now expected, reliable power jacks and, yes, status LEDs. But they made sure the core sonic engine, the actual circuit heart, stayed true to the originals.
And now, under Dunlop, MXR isn't just a retro brand. They've managed to balance that heritage with a lot of modern innovation, too.
Absolutely. Dunlop proved the enduring relevance of that MXR standard by massively expanding the line. They used that same compact format for totally new 21st century designs. The carbon copy delay is a perfect example, became one of the best-selling analog delays ever, capturing that warm BBD sound in the classic MXR footprint. They've also done great artist collaborations like the EVH signature pedals, and they keep putting out new stuff, analog, digital hybrids, catering to modern players. MXR today is arguably stronger and more respected than ever, which just shows how fundamentally right those original designs were.
Okay, so we've gone through the founding, the tech, the sounds, the cultural peak, the fall, the comeback. What are the big takeaways here? Why does MXR, a company started over 50 years ago, still matter so much today, even if you don't personally use their pedals?
I think the absolute most critical point, the one everything else flows from, is that MXR standardized the industry format, period. Before them, it was kind of the Wild West for pedal sizes and shapes. After MXR, there was a blueprint. Their small, tough, colorful die-cast box set the standard, that mini format that still dominates pedal boards. Every company making a standard rectangular stomp box today, they're working within the framework Barr and Sherwood laid out back in '72. They didn't just make a product. They basically created the global template for what a pedal is.
And it wasn't just the box itself. The stuff inside that box has proven incredibly timeless, too.
Exactly. That's the second big takeaway. The enduring quality of those original circuits, it's just proof of brilliant engineering. The Phase 90, the Distortion Placette, the Dynacomp, they're still being made, still selling well, and fundamentally, they're almost unchanged at their core after nearly 50 years. That's almost unheard of for consumer electronics. They just nailed those foundational sounds for modulation, drive, and compression. They became reference points.
And by making them affordable and tough, they really changed how musicians used effects. They democratized the whole thing.
Right. That focus on accessibility and reliability is key. They took effects out of just high-end studios or custom rigs and put them onto stages everywhere, into the hands of regular working musicians. They made effects accessible, reliable, built for the gigging player. That really fueled the mass adoption of pedals on tour. Before MXR, having cool effects might have been a luxury. After MXR, it started to become an expectation. You look at photos of bands from the late 70s, 80s, you see those colorful little boxes everywhere because they were the workhorse tools. Maximum bang for your buck, maximum reliability.
And finally, the fact that the brand survived bankruptcy and is now thriving under Dunlop, that says a lot about the strength of those original ideas.
It really does. It shows that if you get the industrial design right, compact, rugged, and the core tone right, classic, usable that can be powerful enough to overcome even major business failure, the core engineering and the brand identity were just too good, too valuable to let disappear. Dunlop recognized that. MXR proved that sometimes, nailing the practical stuff, that technical minimalism can conquer a market. Hashtag Tech Hats at Show.
Well, this has been a really illuminating deep dive. We saw how technical know-how from guys like Barr and Sherwood met this really smart industrial design and ended up standardizing a whole global market for music gear. They didn't just invent sounds. They shifted effects from being these bulky, fragile things into essential, colorful, reliable tools that actually fit on a pedal board.
Yeah, and if you look at pretty much any modern pedal board today, whether it's someone's bedroom setup or a huge pro touring rig, you are looking at the direct industrial legacy of that little company started in Rochester back in 1972. They solved the problems of size, durability, and just getting the stuff out there. And by doing that, they enabled generations of musicians to explore sounds without constantly worrying if their gear would break down.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, and it goes back to that Phase 90. Eddie Van Halen used the MXR Phase 90 to create one of the most iconic, complex, instantly recognizable rock guitar sounds ever. Yet the pedal itself, famously simple, just one single knob, speed. So it raises this question for you to think about next time you see a really minimalist piece of gear. InDesign is limiting the options sometimes the actual key? Does forcing the user to focus on playing rather than endless tweaking unlock a kind of pure, repeatable sonic brilliance? Was the simplicity that MXR championed maybe the real secret to their enduring power? Something for you to mull over?